Hey everybody, welcome to my very basic guide. This time it's about being blessed and cursed by RNJesus himself with wild magic as your sorcerer's origin. Who needs to read dusty old books and take years of their lives doing backbreaking hard work when you can be born magical and awesome, right? Sorcerers are cool and they want others to understand. That's why they rely on charisma as their spellcasting ability rather than intelligence or wisdom. Charisma is a very fun ability score to have as your main stat in Dungeons & Dragons, allowing you to interact better with the NPCs that your Dungeon Master worked so hard to create. Sorcerers are hard-capped with the amount of spells that they can know based on their level, so they will not have the absurd amount of spells that wizards can carry around in their spellbooks. Sorcerers also lack the ritual casting ability, so you can't save spell slots by using ritual spells. Starting from humble beginnings of being a level 1 sorcerer, you realize you just love rolling the dice in spite of probably disastrous outcomes. You've got wild magic coursing through your veins, and sometimes it kinda just all comes out all at once. The bread and butter of wild magic sorcerers stem from their wild magic surges that triggers whenever you cast a spell of first level or higher, which means your cantrips don't count. The Dungeon Master chooses if you get to roll a d20 after casting your spell, and on a natural 1 you get to roll a d100 that then determines the wild magic surge outcome found on the wild magic table in the player's handbook. So, obviously a 5% chance to go wild is not super scary, but it definitely adds a lot of tension that your group may or may not appreciate in the moment. Also, one fun thing you could try with your group is to make a custom wild magic table in order to match your character's backstory better, or if you just want a table that is simply deadlier and more risky to play with. Accompanying your worrying magical surges at level 1, you can also choose to sprinkle some advantage on any attack roll, ability check, or saving throw that you make. This is your Tides of Chaos ability. Although you normally can only use this one time before having a long rest to regain Tides of Chaos, your Dungeon Master can also choose to force out a roll on the Wild Magic Surge table whenever you cast a Sorcerer spell that is not a cantrip and your Tides of Chaos charge has been used up. This essentially means once you use your Tides of Chaos, the next spell you cast before a long rest is guaranteed by the DM to be a roll on the table without having to roll a natural 1 on a d20. After rolling on the table, this immediately replenishes your Tides of Chaos feature, and you and your party will have to deal with the aftermath of the choices that you made in your life. Tides of Chaos will most likely be the main source of your wild magic surges actually doing anything, unless you're really good at rolling natural 1s all of the time. At level 2, all sorcerers get access to Font of Magic, which is the foundational building block of all things sorcerers get to do that is unique to their class. From the Font of Magic, sorcerers get sorcery points, which is the magical fuel that powers your metamagic abilities that you get at level 3. Sorcery points also match your sorcerer level starting at level 2 with 2 sorcery points, and then it increases by 1 as you level up. Another sub-ability that you get at level 2 from Font of Magic is Flexible Casting. This is pretty important for sorcerers as you are now able to create additional spell slots from your sorcery points or convert existing spell slots to turn them into sorcery points. A first level spell slot is worth 2 sorcery points, a second level spell slot is worth 3, a third level slot is 5, a fourth level slot is 6, and a fifth level slot is 7. You can only create up to 5th level spell slots, however, you can convert higher tier spell slots into sorcery points, with the level of the spell slot being the number of sorcery points you gain. So, for example, a level 7 spell slot can be converted into 7 sorcery points, which is only equal a 5th level spell slot when creating spell slots. Both of these conversions cost bonus actions and are considered separate actions, so you can't do both in one turn. It is also important to note that you cannot have more sorcery points than what is allowed for your sorcerer level, so if you convert spell slot into sorcery points while you don't have any space, you just lose the sorcery points, wasting them. You also only regain all of your sorcery points on a long rest. At level 3, you get the hallmark feature of the sorcerer class, the Metamagic options. You gain 2 metamagic spells at level 3 and gain 1 at level 10 and another at level 17, with the grand total of being able to have 4 different metamagic options. Careful Spell is a metamagic option that occurs whenever you cast a spell that forces other creatures to make saving throws. You can then spend 1 sorcery point to choose a number of creatures equal to your charisma modifier to auto-pass on their rolls. This is an ability that is not very good most of the time since you and your friends can just position themselves better to not be hit by your own spells, but it does synergize with Wild Magic Sorcerers whenever they roll on the Wild Magic Surge table and then cast Fireball on themselves. They can use Careful Spell to save their friends, but not themselves. But there are still better and less situational options out there for sorcerers. Distance Spell is a fun metamagic option that costs 1 sorcery point, and it doubles the range of a spell that has a minimum range of 5 feet, or if it is a touch spell, then it gains 30 feet in range. This can be easily abused with a feat like Spell Sniper, which gives absurd range and the erasure of most cover types except total cover. However, this is still a situational ability to have since most enemies won't be within your line of sight beyond 200 feet, and most battles happen where the extra distance from Distance Spell is probably not impactful enough to take. Distance Spell also does not work with spells that have a range of self, so many cone area of effect spells like Burning Hands will not work with Distance Spell. Empowered Spell allows you to reroll damage rolls up to a number equal to your Charisma modifier for only 1 sorcery point. This is pretty great on spells that have you roll a lot of dice and affect multiple enemies like Fireball. Since you probably will roll low on some of your dice, and being able to reroll ones will help you get a decent uptick on your damage potential for only 1 sorcery point. Empowered Spell is also a Metamagic that allows you to combo it with a different Metamagic option in the same turn. Extended Spell allows you to double the duration of a spell that has a duration of at least 1 minute or longer to a maximum of 24 hours. This can be good since you can try to extend the duration of spells to last multiple encounters for only 1 sorcery point. But Extended Spell is generally situational and more utility oriented, like for example extending invisibility for an extra hour, which could be cool. Heightened Spell procs whenever you cast a spell that forces enemies to make saving throws. You get to give one target disadvantage on their first saving throw made against that spell. Heightened Spell costs 3 sorcery points, so it is pricey, but being able to screw over a boss might be well worth the cost. Quickened Spell allows the user to change the casting time of a spell that costs 1 action to 1 bonus action. Quickened Spell costs 2 sorcery points. This is fairly strong, but it is restricted by Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition spellcasting rules, which states that whenever you cast a spell that costs only a bonus action, you can only then cast a cantrip on the same turn. But a cantrip plus spell is still a powerful metamagic option to have, and should be strongly considered in many builds. Subtle Spell allows you to skip the somatic and verbal components of a spell you cast for only 1 sorcery point. So Subtle Spell is a pretty niche option to have, but it can be very cool in social situations, or when you are caught in a silent spell, or if you are restrained, you can then use Subtle Spell to skip the somatic and verbal components to then keep casting your spells. Twin Spell is the final metamagic option from the PHB. When you cast a spell that targets only one creature, you can expend a sorcery point equal to the spell's level to target a secondary creature within range of that same spell. There is some contention about which spells are considered to be eligible for Twin Spell, since the words target a single creature is not a single defined keyword in the player's handbook. The way I think it's supposed to work is that if the spell specifically outlines the way it can affect multiple targets within the spell's description, then it should not be eligible to be twinned. This is why spells like Dragon's Breath does not work with Twin Spell, but Haste or Invisibility can still be twinned. But in the end, if there is still confusion, just talk to your Dungeon Master, since your DM has the final say to everything that goes on in your world. But yeah, long story short, I think Twin Spell is pretty good and should be considered in most builds as well. There are also a few more metamagic options that were introduced in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, such as Seeking Spell, which allows you to re-roll a failed attack roll for a spell that you cast, but then you must use the new roll. Seeking Spell costs 2 sorcery points, and also allows you to combine its effects with other metamagic abilities. Seeking Spell is a really good metamagic option for offensive sorcerers that want to make sure that they don't get screwed over when casting something and then missing, which wastes their hard-earned spell slot. Transmuted Spell is the other metamagic option that was introduced in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. It allows you to change the damage type of your spell for only 1 sorcery point, as long as the original damage type of the spell is Acid, Cold, Fire, Lightning, Poison, or Thunder. So unfortunately, Radiant, Necrotic, and Force is not available for this metamagic option, but being able to get around enemy resistances and immunities is always a really nice tool to have. Remember to talk to your Dungeon Master to see if they allow the Tasha's Cauldron of Everything metamagic options before planning a build around them, just to be safe. Now, with all of the metamagic options out of the way, we go back to the features that wild magic sorcerers uniquely get, such as Bend Luck at level 6. Bend Luck is an ability that allows you to use your reaction to give a bonus or penalty of 1d4 to any attack roll, ability check, or saving throw that you can see. You can also wait and see the result of the natural d20 roll before using Bend Luck, but before any effects from the roll actually happens. Bend Luck does cost 2 sorcery points, but it is not a limited feature as long as you have sorcery points and a reaction to use it. This is a pretty strong ability to have on a caster, as it adds a lot of supportive capabilities to a class that is already very versatile in its function. The biggest drawback is that the ability states you can only give the d4 bonus or malice to another creature, so you can't modify your own rolls, but you can cast a spell that forces another creature to make a saving throw and then debuff them by 1d4, or you can buff your allies as well. Overall, I think Bend Luck is probably the most reliable and solid tool that the Wild Magic Sorcerer gets for most of the game, and it's a pretty good one to have, even though it is somewhat expensive. At level 14, you get good at handling the magical surges that overtake you from time to time, and you gain the Controlled Chaos ability. Controlled Chaos allows you to always roll twice whenever you roll on the Wild Magic Surge table, and are able to pick which number you want to go for. This synergizes very nicely with the core design of Wild Magic Sorcerers, and gives the player the ability to be less afraid of turning themselves into a plant or blowing up the party, and hopefully just be more productive with their Wild Magic Surges. Which, there are some pretty good effects on the default table, not just self-harming ones, believe it or not. For the capstone ability of Wild Magic Sorcerers, you get to hurt things a little easier with Spell Bombardment at level 18. When you roll the highest possible number on any of the dice that comes from a damage roll from any spell, you get to roll an additional die. So for example, if you cast Fireball, you roll a bunch of d6s, and if you roll a 6 on any of those dice, then Spell Bombardment triggers, and you get to roll an additional d6 and add it to the damage pool. Spell Bombardment can be triggered once per turn. The extra damage roll at that level is not game changing by itself, but the fact that it's flat damage that doesn't cost you any extra resources, and you get to keep doing it every turn, definitely adds up over the course of an adventure. Keep in mind, Spell Bombardment enhances all spells that do damage, so your cantrips also get a boost, and since the extra damage is considered a regular damage roll, your critical hits also doubles the Spell Bombardment damage die. And one final ability that all sorcerers get at level 20 is Sorcerer's Restoration, which simply allows you to regain 4 sorcery points when you short rest, which is a really nice and neat ability to have if you make it this far into the game. The Wild Magic Origin subclass may not have the most consistent abilities when it comes to raw mechanical reliability compared to its competitors, but I do think it's a very interesting subclass to have in the game, and it definitely fulfills the niche of having a protagonist that is carried by plot armor, or a never-lucky hero that gets screwed by existing. Although its gimmicks are the namesake of the subclass, the 6th level ability Bend Luck is genuinely strong, and it allows for a full caster that is not the bard to reliably buff up their allies or nerf their enemies when the situation calls for it. This is on top of being able to cast spells, which is always a powerful tool to have in Dungeons & Dragons. And that about concludes my very basic guide on Wild Magic Sorcerers. But before the video ends, let me just say a few more words. Thank you guys so much for all the supportive comments that I've been receiving while I've been away, getting wrecked by school. I really thought that people would leave when I became inactive, and I'm just really grateful that people enjoy my stuff and that anybody would take the time to actually comment and subscribe. It actually means a lot to me, thank you. It makes me really happy to see people enjoy what I do in my spare time. I won't be really the most active of channels, but I will strive to always come back when I have more time in my life. Again, thank you guys so much. And as always, I hope that anyone who watches my stuff enjoys what I create as much as I enjoy creating it in the first place. I hope to see you guys next time. Until then, goodbye for now.